Saturday, the 16th of May. It's Bevy here, coming to you from Hamtopia. Rainbows, sparkles, unicorns, and all that good shit. Anyway, hope everybody's staying safe still and taking good care of themselves. Now, we are back again today with another installment of The Reaper and the Scribe. We are on chapter 45 of The Reaper and the Scribe. 2 weeks had passed, and things had begun to settle back into a quiet, low-key routine. That put a smile on the now official Chief Inspector Johnson's face. This was how it should be. No demons from other realms, ghosts, bombs, or sword fights, and especially no murders. Yep, police work was back to how it should be. D.I. Donna Lambert strolled into Chief Inspector Paul Johnson's office, her facial scars still red, but healing. Her dentist had worked wonders on her teeth, and her best dress was all cleaned and pressed. "You're looking glamorous, Lambert," observed Johnson. "We have to look our best for Sarah this afternoon," replied the D.I. "Yep, we do. It's not often someone gets the key to the city, especially someone as young as Sarah. Imagine the impact on the youngsters of our city, having a hero in their own age group. I only hope she doesn't swear in front of the Lord Mayor," said Johnson with a smile. Cindy was busy tying Jeff's tie. "There, you look very smart. Good enough for the Civic Hall." "I feel all trussed up. I can hardly move in this suit," complained Jeff. "Be quiet, Jeff. You couldn't go in a t-shirt and jeans," chuckled Cindy. At that point, a car horn sounded outside. "The taxi's here," said Cindy excitedly, and the couple made their way downstairs and out to the taxi. The limousine was parked outside Gavin Jackson's block of apartments, awaiting the appearance of the town's hero. Unfortunately, the girl of the moment was locked in a bathroom. "I'm not coming out, and you can't make me," said Sarah. "Oh, why won't you come out? The car's here, and everybody is waiting at the Civic Hall. Just for you, my love," said Gavin gently. "If you come out, I will let you assist me all day tomorrow. I might even let you make an incision," offered Gavin. The bathroom door suddenly unlocked, and the door opened slightly. "Promise," pouted Sarah. "Scout's honor," replied Gavin. "Okay then, let's go," shouted Sarah as she burst out of the bathroom and ran to the door, giggling. "I see you have dressed for the occasion," said Gavin with a smile. "Yep," was Sarah's reply. Her occasion attire was a black miniskirt with pink rabbits on it. She wore a black shirt with a tie. The tie was black with pink rabbits on it, and pink tights with black rabbits. The finishing effect came from a little pair of black plimsolls with no rabbits at all. Gavin joined her at the door in his dinner suit and black tie. He thought to himself, "What a striking couple we are," and once again smiled. Gavin helped Sarah to the car, and they slowly made their way through the streets to the Civic Hall. As they made their way through the city center, the streets were lined with people cheering, all trying to get a look at the special person who had saved all their lives. The crowd was not aware of the supernatural part. They just knew this girl had stopped a terrorist from blowing up the nuclear plant, and they were grateful. The occasion was getting grander as they neared the civic buildings because the army had a guard of honor arrayed up the stairs to the hall. Watching from a top-floor window of one of the tower blocks was John Smith, who was preparing for a meeting himself. In the 2 weeks since the standoff with Atkinson, the rejuvenated Tamara had been instructing him about what he had done up until then. But more importantly, he learned what Atkinson Sr. and Dewhirst wanted him to do from now on. To suddenly find out that he was the human part of what was basically the Grim Reaper was hard enough to take in, but then to be asked to carry on his work was extreme, to say the least. Then she explained that she was taking him to this meeting in another realm, and that when he returned, he would no longer be human. That was the icing on the cake. "You're going to be just fine, John," comforted Tamara. "Am I? I don't share your confidence, Tamara," he confessed. "All you have to do is come with me this afternoon, and everything will be all right. Just trust me, John. You will feel things you won't believe. You will see with the eyes of a god. Everything will be at your disposal. And I do mean everything, John," said Tamara in a very suggestive way. As the limousine stopped at the foot of the stairs to the grand civic hall, a brass band began to play a version of "Holding Out for a Hero." Gavin exited the car first, made his way around to Sarah's door, and opened it. As Sarah stepped out of the car, the crowd cheered, and the guard of honor stood to attention. Sarah was overcome with emotion, and she cuddled Gavin for support. They both made their way up the red carpet on the steps, but Sarah kept her head buried in Gavin's chest. At the very top of the wide stone steps stood the Lord Mayor, flanked by council dignitaries from every political party, all of whom wanted to shake Sarah's hand. Away from the party at the Civic Hall, Tamara took hold of John Smith's hand and asked him if he was ready for his date with destiny. "Can I refuse my date?" asked John hopefully. Tamara walked up to him and straightened his tie. "No," she said, giving him a kiss on the cheek. "Okay, then lead the way," said John Smith quite timidly. Tamara pressed the A button on her special mobile phone, took John Smith by the hand, and they both were instantly transported to the realm where Atkinson Sr. awaited their arrival. By now the handshakes were over on the steps of the Civic Hall, and the main party had gone inside. The crowd outside began to leave as the speeches inside began, with a tribute to the youth of today by the Lord Mayor. Many tributes followed, but none was like the one that the new chief inspector gave. Paul Johnson waxed lyrically about how civilians played an epic part in all of this, and in particular, young civilians such as Jeff Clark, the new coroner, Gavin Jackson, and the girl of the moment, Sarah. But he paid the biggest tribute to Matthew, or Matt, as we all knew him. When he arrived at the police station, I thought he was a freak. I knew nothing of hypnotism and was going to have nothing to do with it. But the young people sitting here before you convinced me to give him a chance. He was so successful regressing our subject that the investigation was saved precious time that we could ill afford to lose. Then, near the end, he paid the ultimate sacrifice to protect his friend. He lost his young life in that struggle by the madman we were pursuing. I don't know many hardened police officers who would have gone against this beast, but Matt did so without hesitation. Thanks to this selfless attitude shown by Matt, his friend John Smith's life was saved. Unfortunately, John Smith, who also played his part in the team effort that brought his madman down, cannot be with us today. So with no further ado, I would like you to raise your glasses to our saviors, Sarah, Matt, John, Jeff, and Gavin. The assembled masses all rose, raised their glasses, and saluted the town's young heroes. Atkinson Sr. was sitting in his throne-like chair as Tamara introduced John Smith to him. "You must forgive Mr. Dewhirst's absence, but you did play a part in him being back in your domain," said the old deity, with a voice resembling someone suffering from laryngitis. "My son's untimely exit from your old domain has left me with a problem, Mr. Smith. Dewhirst should be resting and spending time here with me, but he has had to go back to carry on our work. Now, what can we do about that, Mr. Smith?" continued Atkinson Sr. Smith looked straight into Atkinson's eyes and answered, "Are you offering me a promotion? If you are, is the benefits package the same?" He turned and looked at Tamara. "Know you this? All he had will be yours. His powers yours. His benefits yours. Should you fail and be unworthy, his fate will also be yours. Tamara is your list maker. She will show you the ins and outs of your new position. Your office awaits. Now be gone. I grow weary of this change," said the shadowy figure. As they left, Tamara said, "Two things bother me." "What bothers you?" asked John. Atkinson Sr. said, "Untimely exit. Usually, when a being has ended its life, he says it's dead. That leaves me worried. He knows everything, and he did not confirm his son's death. He just said, exited the domain. It's probably a slip of the tongue. What's the other thing? I thought you liked boys. I saw how you looked at me when you asked for Atkinson's benefits," she said with a smile. "I did look at you, and I don't know why I'm like this. It seems everything is different and still the same. My whole life has been turned upside down," waxed an unsure Mr. Smith. Tamar smiled, and somehow the confused John Smith was reassured. The list maker and new reaper watched the firework finale above the Civic Hall with a glass of Dom Perignon from a hotel balcony. Chapter 46. The front door at the offices of Atkinson, Dewhirst, and Smith opened, and John Smith walked in. "Sorry to hear of Mr. Dewhurst's untimely demise," said old Mr. Braithwaite, the usual announcer of a change in figurehead. All the old pin-pushers put their heads down and continued their work. How strange, thought Smith. It was Atkinson who had just been removed, not Dewhurst. But Dewhurst had to come back when Atkinson was removed. He then realized that was twice he had thought the word removed instead of killed. He would have thought no more of this had he not witnessed Tamara's death, and then, moments later, was reunited with her. Strange indeed. Was a rejuvenated Atkinson awaiting him around the next corner? "Enough of this nonsense!" cried out Smith, and all the clerks looked up simultaneously. John Smith looked slightly embarrassed as he made for his office. Only now he realized there were no young, upwardly mobile members of staff to send each other emails. That must have been a quirk of that strange Tuesday when all this began. It was just the 700-year-old Sunny Acres mob. Maybe some of these fossils could retire. After all, eternity was a long time to share with this workforce, he thought to himself. "Coffee, a tea, or me?" offered Tamara. John Smith just looked at her as he slammed the door closed and fell back on it, looking quite scared. "Whatever is the matter, John?" inquired Tamara. "Why, did you think it odd that Atkinson Sr. didn't use the word dead when describing the demise of his son?" quivered John Smith. "Relax, John," assured Tamara. "What if he is back? "He will come for us both," panted John Smith. "Remember, John, there cannot be two reapers at the same time. You are quite safe," she comforted. "Now, back to my original question. Tea or coffee? I don't think you're in the mood for me." She laughed. "Tea, please," said Smith. Jeff Clark walked into the lobby of his newspaper building, knowing his boss was back. Jeff had set a new record of getting fired, and not counting Sid, of course, but Sid had been there a long time. However, Sid had never been fired in a hospital. Jeff alone held that distinction. He looked into the canteen to say hi to Cindy. "I'm not looking forward to this," announced a nervous Jeff. "You will be fine," reassured Cindy. "Do you want a cup of tea before you go up?" "No, thanks. I better get this over with," said Jeff. In his office, Donald Steele was tapping a tune on his desk with a pen when he heard Jeff knocking on the door. "Go away!" he roared. Jeff took a deep breath and walked into the editor's office. Steele looked at Jeff for a moment. He held his gaze, and then he put his pen down. "What am I going to do with you?" he said in a surprisingly quiet voice. "You got the story, but you didn't do what I told you to do. So if you are hell-bent on acting like your friend Sid, you leave me no alternative. I want you to go and clear your desk. Somebody else needs it now." Jeff's head fell as all that he was expecting was unfolding before his eyes. Then a wry smile came to Don Steele's face as he announced, "And move your stuff into Sid's old office. That was reporting from the seat of your pants, boy. You can't teach that kind of reporting. It is born into you. My God, you will probably get a prize for this story," grinned the editor. Jeff was elated and thought to himself that now was not a good time to tell his editor that he had signed a paper at the police station saying he would not write the story as it would cause too much unrest. Sarah's eyes opened wide as she assisted Gavin in her first real autopsy. She watched and admired the young coroner going about his duties. Gavin had never known a more wonderfully strange girl in his whole life, a life that had started a new chapter, having arrived at this town only a few short weeks ago. The police station was quite busy. A woman was at the front desk, complaining of boys in her street playing football and her greenhouse window having been smashed. 3 cats had gone missing. One man wanted the police to intervene in an argument that he and his neighbor had started over the dividing line of their gardens, and a purse had been lost. Yep, everything was truly back to normal. "Why is it that I know what to do at my new position, Tamara?" inquired John Smith as he and Tamara drank a cup of tea in his office. "I have had no training, and yet I am totally ready to start." "Relax and don't worry so much. You will be good at this. Your journey to the other realm and your meeting with Atkinson Sr. is the reason you appear to know everything, assured Tamara as she sipped her tea without wetting her lips. Your first list is ready, and it is time to go. I know you know what to do, but just let me run through it with you so there are no mistakes. Every living human has an invisible cord that links them from the plane of existence to the realm of death. Each one has an allotted time on this earth, and when that time is up, you cut their cord, resulting in the death of the individual human. How they die is not important. It's the time that is important, for as you are cutting the cord in the realm of death, they die on the plane of existence, and their name is inscribed in the great book in the other realm. Is that how you see it, John? Asked Tamara. Pretty much, he replied. Then we are as one, the eternal list maker and gatherer of souls, said Tamara. The old door behind the desk creaked open. Tamara gave John a kiss on the cheek. John walked into the realm of death, and the door swung shut behind him. As he walked into this strange land, he noticed the sound was muffled, and it was unusually bright. He had imagined there to be billions of cords, all going into one central place, but there weren't. In fact, the only visible cords were the ones to be cut. He took hold of the first one, and with one flash of his giant sword, a life was terminated. He carried on like this for 12 days and 12 nights, until every cord was severed. Only then did he stop and think of what he had just completed, and he felt good. He turned and looked over his shoulder towards the door that led back into the plane of existence. He saw what looked like a tall, muscular man, but he was very faint and had no cord attached to his person. As he walked towards this faint but imposing figure, the man faded away. Smith walked towards the door and went through it. He gave the strange figure no more thought as he passed back into his old realm, where Tamara was still finishing off her tea, as if he had only been gone for 12 seconds, not 12 days. Tamara welcomed the new reaper back and said, "Wow, you did that faster than Atkinson. Did you have a good time?" The newly invigorated John Smith smiled and said, "Oh, yes." The phone rang, and Tamara answered. "Hello, Chief Inspector. How can I help?" Tamara placed her hand over the phone and asked Smith if it was all right for him to come over. John Smith readily agreed, and she relayed the message. "He will be here in an hour," announced Tamara. "What does Paul want?" inquired Smith. "I'm not quite sure, John, but he did say it's off the record," smiled Tamara. "When he is gone, shall we go eat?" asked John. "Remember, John, what you want, you get. You are the master now, not the slave," said Tamara. "I know, But in this realm I'm used to living a quiet life. For the meantime, at least, I would like that to continue. We have found out what happens when you are too controlling, and I certainly don't want to end up fighting you." He laughed. The date had been set, and the invitations had gone out. Now it was time to meet the parents. Sarah sat in the passenger seat, while Gavin drove his gleaming Jaguar up the long driveway to his parents' country home. Donald and Harriet Jackson sat in their Edwardian drawing room, awaiting the imminent arrival of their darling son and the rather common girl they were about to be introduced to. The afternoon quiet in John Smith's office was broken with Braithwaite tapping on the door. "Chief Inspector Johnson to see you, sir," announced the elderly gentleman. "Paul, do come in," invited John. "John, Tamara. Hello, nice to see you again." "Would you care for a beverage?" asked Tamara. "Nah, thanks. I just wanted to chat with you both, off the record, as friends, if that's okay," said Johnson with a worried smile. Tamara offered him a chair. At the mansion, Sarah inquired, "Is this your dad?" as a tall, distinguished gentleman opened the car door. "No," replied Gavin. "This is Jarvis, my parents' butler. How the devil are you, Jarvis? You look great," he continued. "I'm exceedingly good, Master Gavin. May I take the ladies' cases?" said Jarvis efficiently. "She doesn't have any, my good fellow," Gavin replied. "Cases of what? And what is a butler?" whispered Sarah into Gavin's ear. Gavin gave his now customary smile and said, "Just say, 'Hello, Jarvis.'" "Hello, Mr. Jarvis. I'm Sarah, and I'm very pleased to meet you," said Sarah, as she did the curtsy she had been practicing. Jarvis's Edwardian posture relaxed for a brief moment, and a faint smile was cracking his stiff upper lip. Back at Atkinson, Dewhirst, and Smith, John opened the conversation. "What can we do for you, Paul?" "I have witnessed phantom bombs, people emerging from surrogate bodies, and ancient warriors fighting on the town hall clock tower. The worrying thing is that the two ancient warriors died, but here I am, chatting with one of them. Do you get my point?" asked Paul. "Are you worried the other one might return?" replied John Smith. "In a word, yes." "I will let Tamara handle this, Paul." Tamara explained about how two soul gatherers cannot exist at the same time. This gave the detective chief inspector the answer he wanted, and he left with a certain amount of ease. After he had left, John thought about the shadowy figure he saw on his way back from the realm of death. "Can my cord be cut, Tamara?" John asked. "We do not have cords," replied the list maker. "How many people don't have cords?" was the next question. "You and I, Atkinson, and Dewhirst are above the life and death thing. We are completely different beings." Why? Asked Tamara. That's it, then. It was one of those two checking that I was doing the job right. Whew, said a relieved John Smith. Tamara looked straight at John Smith and said, What are you talking about? Neither Atkinson nor Dewhirst can enter that domain while you're there. Who was the guy standing by the door when I made my way back then? Asked the new reaper. It was your imagination, John. That domain can play strange tricks on your mind the first time you enter it. Jarvis opened the grand front door into an imposing reception hall, closely followed by the two young lovers. I am so going down that banister rail, said Sarah. I used to get scolded for the same thing as a boy, said Gavin. In the next instant, Sarah ran up the stairs, placed her leg over the top of the banister, and slid all the way down. She fell rather unladylike on the floor, with her legs in the air. This is Sarah, Mother, said Gavin, as Sarah looked up at the very stern-looking Mrs. Jackson. Hi, pleased to meet you, Mum, smiled Sarah. You need to work on your dismount, my dear, came a booming voice from behind the silently astonished leader of the Allerton Chapel branch of the Women's Institute. Donald Eugene Jackson just smiled, shook his son's hand, and whispered to him, You're going to have to work on your mother. Both men began to laugh. Jarvis left the room as the two ladies looked at each other. Come on inside the drawing room, my dear, said Gavin's father, as he put his arm around his soon-to-be daughter-in-law and led her into the room. I'm good at drawing, said the breath of fresh air that wafted into the stuffy old English drawing-room. I'm sure you are, my dear, said the gray-haired, distinguished gentleman. Gavin put his arm around his stunned mother and followed them in. Jarvis arrived in the room, carrying a silver tray containing bone china, cups and saucers, a grand teapot, and a cake stand adorned with all manner of sweet delights. I took the liberty of purchasing this beverage for the master's betrothed, announced Jarvis. Sarah just looked at Gavin, bemused. Gavin whispered that Jarvis had just told her the can of Coke was for her. Sarah smiled and gave Jarvis a hug, saying, Thank you very much. Jarvis's cheeks lost their paleness as he gave a slightly embarrassed cough and quickly left the room. Gavin and his father roared with laughter. A crack of a smile appeared on the lady of the house's face. She began to warm, as everyone eventually does, to this delightfully strange but sweet girl. After the shaky start, the afternoon tea went well, and Gavin realized how lucky he was to have found Sarah. Tamara looked out of the window at the unmarked police car driving away. She had a worried reflection staring back at her from the pane of glass. What or who was lurking in the realm of death, and what damage could it do? A penny for 'em. Tamara turned around very quickly to see a smiling John Smith. Why did you use that turn of phrase? It's important, John. Why? Shouted Tamara. I didn't say anything, a slightly bemused Smith answered. For the first time, John Smith saw that Tamara looked scared. Okay, said John. I'm worried now. What just happened? Tamara slowly sat down at her desk, put her head in her hands, and said, I've just heard Atkinson's voice in my head. Tamara and John Smith just looked at each other in the very old office of the even older firm. In the deepest recesses of the darkest eternity, a shackled lesser god was undoing the chains that bound him to that dark place, one by one, getting stronger with each chain that he removed from his body. Eternal revenge was in his cold, dead heart for a lover who had betrayed him, a surrogate who had taken his place, a father who showed he didn't have the killing edge anymore, a policeman, a young journalist, a meddling coroner, and the girl whose knife had spoiled what was to be his finest hour. He would enjoy the killing of that individual most of all. Back at the mansion, it was quickly moving towards bedtime. Gavin knew there was no way that he and Sarah would be allowed to share the same room. I'm going to show Sarah to her room, announced Gavin. I will pour you a brandy, Gavin. We have much to organize, said his father with a smile. Gavin and Sarah began to climb the stairs when Gavin asked her about her brothers and sisters. I don't really have any. That's my foster family, and they only ever kept me for the money they received. I did have a sister, but we were separated at birth, said Sarah, looking slightly sad. Well, you're going to have a family now, my dear. Gavin took her to the room where the maid was waiting to attend to Sarah. Hello, said Sarah. Who are you? I'm Alice, my lady. I will tend your needs. The two girls went into the bedroom after Gavin had given her a good-night kiss. Shall I draw you a bath, miss? Asked Alice as they entered the room. Thank you, replied Sarah. Let's be my friend while I'm here. Stuttered Alice. I don't think the mistress will allow for me to be your friend. You see, I'm not of the same class as you people, and I'm not allowed to mingle with you, replied Alice, with her head down. That's just silly. We are now friends, and if anyone doesn't like it, they can deal with my lovely Gavin, enforced Sarah. Tamara's phone rang. On answering, she was instantly transported to the other realm. What troubles you, list maker? Demanded Atkinson, sitting on his vast, throne-like chair. You know what troubles me, great one. My mind is at your every whim, said Tamara humbly. Your thoughts go to my absent son, snarled Atkinson. Again, you haven't dismissed him as being dead, said Tamara. We both know the answer to that question, hissed Atkinson. Where he is, he can do no harm, he continued. I hope that's true, because John Smith has seen him in the realm of death, and he's spoken to me, interrupted Tamara. Silence, list-maker! What you say cannot be. All the events of the recent past have played a part in what you two think you are seeing and hearing. Now begone! Once again, I tire of you. Tamara didn't find herself back in her domain. She reappeared in Dewhirst's private chamber. My lords, how can I be of assistance? Asked Tamara, as she lowered her head. Before you go, know you this. Should my partner's idiot son somehow return to your domain, seek out your sibling. Only the two of you together are strong enough to protect Smith during this time of adjustment. The old god closed his eyes, and the audience was over. Tamara found herself back in the office, looking at John. She was clearly shaken as Smith took her in his arms and asked, What just happened? Nothing, John. Dewhirst wanted to tell me that I have to visit my sibling, she replied, and not too convincingly. Brother or sister? Asked Smith. Until a moment ago, John, I wasn't aware I had either, she replied. At the newspaper building, an eruption had occurred in the editor's office. It was time that the story of all stories should have been on Don Steele's desk, but it wasn't. Worst of all, he had just found out about the paper Jeff had signed. Get the lawyers in here now! Screamed the purple-faced editor. Calm down, sir, urged his secretary. Be careful. Remember what happened last time? Yeah, I can remember, and he caused that too. I want to see if that paper is legal. Clark! Clark! Where the hell is that kid? Demanded the editor. Jeff Clark was already out of the building. He was on his way to the police station to let them know what was about to hit them. Come in, Jeff, welcomed Dion Lambert. The chief is out. Will I do? Asked Donna Lambert. My editor has just found out about that paper I signed, saying I wouldn't print the story. He was calling the lawyers into his office when I escaped, explained Jeff. I don't know the ins and outs of what happened, but the chief inspector won't be long. I'm sure he will sort it out, she reassured with a smile. Tamara sat at her desk, trying to think back to a time when she'd had a brother or sister. As hard as she tried, nothing was emerging from her past. All she could think of were the many battles she had fought to protect the man for whom she drew up lists. in the final fight she'd had against him. The only reason she'd defeated him was because of the help of that strange little girl who was brave enough to stab him with the knife he had used on her. With that thought, she got up from her desk, put on her coat, and announced to John Smith that she was leaving but would be back before nightfall. The doorbell rang at the mortuary, and Tom answered. "Good evening," said Tom to the elegant lady standing there. "I'm afraid Mr. Jackson is away for the weekend. Can I be of assistance?" "I'm a friend of his parents, and I was in the area, so I thought I would come and see him," announced the well-dressed woman. "Oh, dear," replied Tom. "That's where they have gone." "They?" asked the woman. "Yeah, he and his fiancée," said Tom, all of a sudden realizing he might be giving away too much information to this stranger. "Do tell Gavin I called," replied the woman. "May I ask who called, madam?" asked Tom. "Tamara," replied the elegant lady, as she walked serenely away. Tamara took the phone from her handbag and called the office. Mr. Braithwaite answered, and Tamara instructed him to find the address of the coroner's parents, and that time was of the essence. Braithwaite set about his task, and in seconds gave her the whereabouts of Gavin Jackson's parents. "If I'm not back in time, tell Mr. Smith his list is in the top right-hand drawer of my desk." Braithwaite agreed, and Tamara put her phone back into her handbag. At the police station, Chief Inspector Paul Johnson arrived back at his office to find D.I. Lambert and Jeff Clark already there. "Hello, Jeff," said the chief inspector. "What brings you here?" he continued. "My editor has found out about the paper that I signed," answered Jeff. "Ah, I think I should pay a visit to your Mr. Steele. My old boss and he had many a run-in over what should and shouldn't be printed," laughed Johnson. "Has his temper improved with age?" asked Johnson hopefully. "It's got worse," replied Jeff. Just as they were all laughing, Paul Johnson's phone rang. "Hello, what can I do for you?" Jeff and D.I. Lambert were still quietly laughing together when Johnson said, "I have one of them with me now. Leave that to me, Tamara." Jeff and Donna Lambert looked at each other with puzzled expressions on their faces. "Okay, I'll see you when you get back," said the chief, as he put his phone back into his pocket and looked at Jeff with a worried brow. "I'm going to have to detain you, Jeff." "What have I done?" replied the startled reporter. "Nothing, lad. It's for your own good. Tamara has just asked me to round up everybody connected with the Atkinson case and to meet up with her when she arrives back with Gavin and Sarah. I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. I was only talking to her today, and she told me that nothing could go wrong." Sarah had spent the day trying to piece together the strange dreams from the previous night when Gavin asked her, "What's the matter, Sarah? You've been quiet all day." "I don't know. Maybe it's this strange house. I didn't sleep well, and I feel strange today." "In what way strange? Do you feel you are coming down with something?" inquired Gavin. "No. It was as if someone was trying to tell me something," said Sarah, with a confused expression. "Nothing that a spot of afternoon tea won't put right," said Gavin, with a smile. "There is a Miss Tamara Stapleton here to see Master Gavin," announced Jarvis, as the Jacksons were settling down to afternoon tea with their soon-to-be daughter-in-law. Gavin and Sarah looked at each other, and Gavin asked his parents to excuse them. They both went to the front door. "We have much to discuss on our way back to the office," announced Tamara. "We need to be back before John Smith starts work this evening," she continued. "The office? Why? What has happened? Have there been more murders?" said Gavin, with a worried expression. "Not yet," said Tamara, "but there will be." She looked at the little girl holding on to him. Sarah said, "I will get our things. You let your mom and dad know what's happening." With a worried look in his eyes, Gavin withdrew to the drawing room and explained to his parents that the weekend had come to an end. At the police station, Paul Johnson was beginning to feel nervous when he heard shouting from downstairs. Not long after, his phone rang. "Show him up to my office," said Johnson. The chief inspector looked at Jeff Clark and said, "This is going to be interesting." There was a knock on the door, and in walked Donald Steele. "Where's Chief Inspector Thompson? And what is he doing here?" said the editor, holding out a disapproving finger at the young reporter. "He is helping us with our inquiries," said Johnson. "Well, let me help you with those inquiries. From tomorrow, you will find him at the job center." "And who the hell are you?" interrupted Donald Steele. "As an editor, you are behind in the news. My predecessor, Chief Inspector Jack Thompson, is dead. I am Chief Inspector Paul Johnson. Firstly, I would ask you to lower your voice and alter its tone if you want to know why your employee is here. Like I said earlier, he is helping us with our very important inquiries, the likes of which have never been written about in any newspaper. Now, you can help us or hinder us," said the new chief, with an air of superiority about himself. The editor stood for a while with his mouth open. Eventually he regained his composure, looked at Jeff Clark, and said, "My office, 9 a.m. This better be good." The door slammed as Steele left the room. Gavin kissed his mother goodbye and said they would be back soon. Sarah gave Gavin's father a kiss on his cheek and said, "See you both soon." She jumped into Gavin's Jaguar, where Tamara was already sitting. "How did you get here?" asked a smiling Sarah. "I was dropped off," said Tamara, as astral travel was probably beyond Sarah's understanding at the moment. Gavin got into the driver's seat, turned the key, and the Jaguar roared into life, spraying small stones from under the back wheels as they exited the driveway of the manor house. "What's going on, Tamara?" asked Gavin as he peered through the windshield at the road ahead. "Let's just say we are going to a very important meeting about our old friend Atkinson," she replied. "Atkinson?" said Gavin, taking his eyes off the road for a moment. "I will explain everything when we arrive at the office," she assured him. "Well, Sarah, did you enjoy your time in the country?" asked Tamara, changing the uncomfortable subject. "It was great! I met Gavin's mom and dad. They are really nice. I also met Mr. Jarvis. He is a very posh gentleman who makes sure everything works in the house. I think his second name is Butler. I made a new friend who runs me a bath and gets my bed ready. It was all really smashing. But I didn't sleep very well," said Sarah, taking in a large gulp of air. Tamara smiled and held out her hand to Sarah. "That all sounds wonderful. I'm sorry you couldn't sleep. Why do you think that was?" she gently asked. "Dreams, strange dreams, about fire and swords and fighting and—" At this point, Sarah stopped talking and looked straight into Tamara's eyes and said, You were with me, and we were fighting a monster. I can't remember anymore." Sarah put her head down. This quiet moment was halted by Gavin announcing, "We will be back in about an hour, give or take 10 minutes. Sarah lifted her head again and smiled. Tamara phoned Chief Inspector Johnson. "We are on our way back. Can we meet at John Smith's office in an hour?" asked Tamara. "No problem. We will meet you there," said the chief. Chief Inspector Paul Johnson, Detective Inspector Donna Lambert, and Jeff Clark arrived at Atkinson, Dewhirst, and Smith first, and were shown to John Smith's office by Mr. Braithwaite. "Come in," said John Smith with a smile. "Tamara told me to expect you guys. It's good to see you again, Jeff," he said as he shook Jeff's hand. "What seems to be the problem, John?" said the ever-efficient chief. "I'm not quite sure, but we will find out presently." "Can I offer you all some tea?" asked John. Not long after, Braithwaite announced the arrival of Tamara and placed a tray of tea on the desk. In the other realm, Dewhurst asked Atkinson Sr. what the meeting with Tamara was about. "A small matter that is worrying your list maker," answered Atkinson. "Your son trying to get back into their realm is no small matter," retorted Dewhurst. "As I told the list maker, he cannot get back there," growled Atkinson. "You know this to be untrue," hissed Dewhurst. "The chains that bind him cannot be broken," argued Atkinson. "Did you fasten the chains yourself?" asked Dewhurst. "I am assured they are secure." "Secure, you say? I don't share your feeling of security. I am the one who has to go back every time he tries to change the way of things, and I grow weary of it all," growled Dewhurst. "It will be dealt with this time," assured Atkinson. If it is not dealt with this time, I will deal with it myself, said a not too convinced, tired deity. After all the pleasantries were over, Tamara called the strange meeting to order, like a chairman of the board. But this wasn't business as usual, and she didn't really know what to say. What's all this about, Tamara? You have been quite vague about the whole thing, said Paul Johnson. Yes, I concur, announced John Smith. Where do I fit into all this? Asked Jeff. One at a time. Please, just let me speak, urged Tamara. None of the people in that office had seen Tamara this unsure of herself. Donald Steele returned to his office and called his lawyers in. To his dismay, he was told that the waiver given to the police was enforceable, so legally he could not go ahead with that particular story. That particular story, thought Steele. What about another angle? Announced Steele. Another angle? Said Jim Harper, the newspaper's lawyer. Jeff Clark has signed a waiver for his story. Let's get another reporter, and then we can go ahead, said Steele triumphantly. Jim Harper said, I will look into it, sir. He left the room with a bundle of papers under his arm. Send in Hunter! Donald Steele blasted into the two-way intercom to his secretary. There was a knock on the door, and Ray Hunter walked in. The editor gave the new reporter the background to the story thus far, and told Ray Hunter that he expected him to remember that he was a reporter and not a collaborator with the police. Ray Hunter placed the dossier with the information under his arm and assured his editor that he would not let him down. By now, Tamara had begun talking. You all know now what happens at this office. For 1,000 millennia, we have done this work faultlessly until now. I don't think I'll like how this is going, said Johnson. Chief Inspector, if I may, interjected Tamara. Sorry, carry on, replied Johnson. The man that Sarah so bravely killed is not dead. At this point, everybody started talking, and the scene was more like a market than a meeting. If I may, gentlemen, screamed Tamara. The room hushed, and Tamara began to speak again. When Sarah plunged that weapon into Atkinson's temple, it should have killed him. That was a special blade forged by the gods many centuries ago. Unfortunately for us, his father intervened, and instead of him dying, he was put in a special place to hold him forever. The place that binds him doesn't appear to be strong enough to hold him. How much time do we have before he escapes? Asked Gavin, looking very worried, holding his intended's hand. I don't know. I'm going to pay him a visit this very night. I know where his father has sent him, and I will try and reason with him. said Tamara softly. That sounds like suicide, said a shaken John Smith. No. If he was free to harm me in that realm, he would be here already, reassured Tamara. I will come with you, said John Smith. You have a list to take care of, John, said the somewhat scared but efficient Tamara. The one person who had stayed silent through all this now began to speak. He'll come after me, won't he? Asked Sarah. Yes, replied Tamara. I will be ready for him this time, announced Sarah. What? Said Gavin. We will go away, miles from here, where he can't find us, stated the coroner. Why do you say that, Sarah? Asked Tamara with a puzzled look. Sarah just looked at Tamara and said, You know exactly what I mean. I know what to do this time. Gavin Jackson, Jeff Clark, Donna Lambert, and Paul Johnson looked at each other and then at the two girls staring at one another. John Smith stood back, looked at what was going on, and wondered what his role would be in all of this. Tamara held Sarah's hand and announced that she needed to talk to Sarah alone. She asked Gavin if he could return for her in 2 hours' time. After many reassurances by Tamara of Sarah's safety, he begrudgingly agreed. He took the love of his life in his arms, kissed her passionately, and withdrew. The meeting broke up, and the worried participants made their separate ways home. John Smith, Tamara, and Sarah were left at the office, looking at each other on the brink of a war, the likes of which mankind had never seen before. Paul Johnson and Gavin Jackson exited the building, looking stunned, worried, and not quite believing what had just transpired. What if he comes back? Said Johnson. Don't remind me. I know who he will come for first. My Sarah, was Jackson's fast reply. He'll get all of us, Gavin, said the chief inspector. And when he has sorted his revenge on us, what then for the world? He didn't have a second thought for laying waste to our city, and that was before we killed him. My God, can you imagine? I still don't understand what this thing is, Gavin, and people will be looking to me for answers, announced a worried chief inspector. Just down the alley, running by the side of the building, out of sight, but within earshot of the two worried officials, Ray Hunter turned his dictaphone to the off position and scurried back to his editor. There was a faint sound of a clock chiming as Tamara pulled out of her desk drawer that night's list for John Smith. Take care, John, said Tamara as he exited the office and entered the realm of death. Sarah looked into the void as the Reaper quietly entered his domain. The door began to close behind him with a slight grating noise, and Sarah looked back towards Tamara. At last, we are alone, said the list maker. Sarah gave a little smile. Tamara had walked over to where she stood and said, "We have only a short time, my brave little girl, and many things we need to discuss." "I feel strange. Why is that?" asked Sarah. "You have many tattoos on your body. Do you have one on your left ankle?" inquired Tamara. "You won't believe this, but I was born with one on my left ankle. Well, I have a birthmark there," answered Sarah. "May I look, Sarah?" asked Tamara. "Of course you can," said Sarah, with her customary smile. Sarah took off her Doc Marten boot and turned down her pink and white hooped sock to reveal her birthmark. When Tamara saw her ankle, she placed her dainty foot on a little stool, drew up her skirt to reveal her stocking top, unfastened the suspender, and gently turned down her stocking all the way to her stilettoed shoe, revealing the exact same birthmark. Sarah was astonished that someone had her birthmark. Tamara knew that the birthmark was the sign of a warrior. Until now, only one person had it, so the only other one must be the sister whose coming Dewhirst had foretold. The two girls replaced their hosiery and footwear and sat down. "Sarah," began Tamara, "I now know your involvement in Atkinson's demise was no accident." "What do you mean?" asked Sarah. "I know all this is going to seem strange, but I was told before I came to get you and Gavin to seek out a sibling to help me defeat Atkinson. Somehow, I don't know why, maybe it's divine intervention from Dewhirst, because I know it would not have come from Atkinson, but somehow I knew that my sister was you. I need you to come to terms with this before Gavin gets back, because I need you. I know. Somehow, I've always known, and something tells me I will be ready when the time comes to stand by your side, like back at the tower," answered Sarah. The two girls hugged as Gavin returned for Sarah, and John Smith returned to their plane of existence. Gavin led Sarah out to the car and asked her if she was okay. "I'm good," answered Sarah. "I have something to tell you, Gavin," she said in a soft voice. "Can it wait until we get home, my love? We can talk over a glass of wine," said Gavin. Sarah smiled and nodded as the gleaming Jaguar pulled away from the strange old building with the changed name, Atkinson, Dewhirst, and Smith. Tamara gave John Smith her special phone and said, "If I'm not back in 20 minutes, call Dewhirst, not Atkinson, and tell him what has transpired." "You can't go in there on your own," announced John. "How gallant you are, John, but what's needed is a savage killer. That is an edge I have that you don't, sweetie," answered Tamara with a kiss on John's cheek. With an air of authority and a beautiful smile, she stepped into the dark realm ever so quietly, leaving John Smith alone in the old building, wondering who would step back out of it. Only time would tell. Gavin's Jaguar whooshed into the underground parking space and came to a smooth halt precisely in the center of his allotted space. The driver's door swung open, and the elegant Gavin Jackson alighted. He walked round to the passenger's door, opened it, and a somewhat calm Sarah took his hand and joined him. A press of a button in Gavin's right hand locked the car and set its alarm, and the betrothed couple made their way to the elevator. Paul Johnson arrived back at the police station. His arrival was low-key and through the back door. He slipped up the stairs to his office. Taking out his old boss's bottle of whiskey, he poured a glass, took a sip, and wished that he was the detective inspector and not the chief. "Well, unfortunately, you are, sir," said D.I. Lambert. The chief dropped his glass and turned sharply round. "I didn't realize I said that out loud, or that you were there, Lambert," said Johnson, bending down to pick up his glass. "Allow me, sir," said the D.I. as she bent down with him. Their hands touched as they both took hold of the glass. D.I. Lambert looked into the chief's worried, tired eyes and caught hold of his hand. "Penny for them, sir?" she said softly. Paul Johnson smiled for a second and then quickly coughed and straightened his tie and said, "Oh, you know, the usual. Cats stuck in trees, arguments about property divides, Armageddon." At this point, the chief sat back in his chair and put his head in his hands. Donna Lambert walked over to the door and locked it. She turned back to the desk and took the phone off its hook. Paul Johnson looked at her as she slowly moved round to where he was sitting and seductively sat on the desk at his side. The downstairs lights at the police station burned all night, but the lights to the upstairs offices, including Chief Inspector Johnson's, were all turned off. Tamara turned to see the heavy door close behind her and checked that all the armor that Dewhirst had deposited into the realm of death was in place on her beautiful body. After sliding the new sword into her left scabbard and the dagger in the scabbard on the side of her right calf, she was ready to face her foe. That was how she now saw the beast, for whom she once had nothing but admiration and love. This time there was no remorse, nothing he could use against her. He would yield or die, and she now favored the latter. With the thought in her mind of, "I'm ready," Dewhurst transported her to the deeper, older realm that held Atkinson Jr. prisoner. As Gavin and Sarah cuddled up on the leather couch, sipping their wine, Sarah began explaining to him what had been discussed back at the office. She explained how divine intervention had put her in that club at that exact time and place to do what she did. Gavin had now come to some sort of understanding that, however unthinkable it was, there was much more to life and death than his field of science was aware of. Knowing that he will come after you first makes me want to just book tickets to anywhere in the world and get out of here, said Gavin softly in her ear. I know, and a part of me thinks that way too. But we would spend our lives running, and sooner or later he would find us. If we are going to have a life together, I want it to be just us, and not us and our fears, she replied. You are, of course, right, my dear. Just tell me what you want me to do, said Gavin, looking quite sad. Just love me. I think love is the strongest weapon you can use against hate. Although I will accept all the weapons they give me, she said with a cheeky grin, trying to make her Gavin feel better. The two young lovers cuddled together, watching the sunset from their skyscraper vantage point, wondering how many more they would share. It was at about this time that Ray Hunter got back to the newspaper building, but to his dismay, the offices were closed and only the night shift printers were working. Raymond Hunter was a man who had spent a good deal of time working for major newspapers, with offices that were open 24 hours a day. He saw this as unprofessional. He placed his backpack containing his notepads, pens, dictaphone, and computer in his office and locked the door. He always left his tools at the office so he could not be called to do extra work, the very reason he didn't work for the broadsheets anymore. As Ray Hunter left the building, from out of the shadows in his darkened office stepped the ghostly figure of a true 24-hour journalist who never got the chance that Hunter had scorned. The deceased Sid Jenkins had no idea why he was not at peace. He just knew there was a reason for him being here, and that reason was to remove what was in this backpack, to give his living friends time to try and work things out. The quiet of the room was shattered when the door lock was clicked back and the handle turned. The specter disappeared back into the shadows as a man with a full-face mask came in the room with a flashlight. Seeing that the room was empty, the man removed the disguise, revealing himself as none other than Jeff Clark. Breaking and entering. Now that's illegal, young Jeff. Jeff Clark froze to the spot on hearing his name and rather foolishly put the mask back on. Although it's an improvement, I've already seen you, said the Phantom. Jeff's eyes widened in recognition as the ghostly figure of Sid Jenkins emerged from the shadows. Do you want to sit down, lad? You look like you've seen a ghost. But you're dead? Finished Sid. Yes. I went to your funeral, said Jeff, who had now removed the mask again. It seems we are both here for the same purpose, which is a good thing. It means I don't have to conjure up a fire to burn the place down. You can just steal it, smiled the old newsman. But that's just it. I don't know why I'm here. I was asleep at home. Then I was dreaming about Tamara. She said I had to meet someone in this room, and here I am, said a confused, scared Jeff Clark. Good. You have just told me the reason I am here. If you look in that backpack, you will find a recording machine. Do not let Donald Steele, or anyone for that matter, hear what is on it, said Sidney Jenkins. At that, the boy took out the dictaphone and placed it in his pocket. The ghostly figure of Sidney Jenkins turned and walked towards the shadows. Just then, the police, acting on a tip-off, burst in and grabbed Jeff Clark, arresting him for breaking and entering. It took a short time for Tamara's eyes to adjust to the dimness of the desolate place she now found herself in. There were all kinds of sounds echoing around this vast catacomb, but no sign of life or anything that resembled it. Just a feeling of dread. Why can you not see me, listmaker? Said a familiar voice. Tamara swung around, but saw nothing. You cannot use the eyes you use in that useless domain where you and all the other little rats scurry around. I don't need eyes. I can smell your presence. She closed her eyes and used her mind. You are foolish to come here. Only my father can let you in or out of here, said Atkinson, as he now stood in front of her. And still you don't fear me. You grow old, listmaker. Your senses are not what they used to be. Your armor is new, hissed Atkinson. Shut up with all this bullshit. We both know you are still bound, or you would have taken the coward's way and killed me from behind, she retorted. Why have you not struck me down, then? Do you still hope for the good times we had to come back? Said Atkinson. Hush, you fool. I know that this is just an image of you. It was a cool trick. It worked on Smith, but it doesn't work on me. I've come here to talk, but I'm quite prepared to kill. So, which will it be, Atkinson? The image in front of her disappeared, and in the dimness she could see him chained to the wall. The wound in his head was untreated, and he was sitting there with all the chains intact. He was bound and unable to cause any trouble. Why have I been sent to kill you if your bondage is holding? Said a confused Tamara. In a very weak voice, Atkinson said, somebody wanted you out of the way for a while. Tamara quickly thought back and was transported to the realm of death and then to the plane of existence. As she returned through the door, John Smith was waiting, and she ran into his arms. "I think it is going to be okay. He is still bound. It's just the domains playing tricks with our imagination." Back in that dark place, Atkinson Jr. let the chains that had bound him drop to the floor, to the sound of his laughter. He laughed for what was to come, and how easily he had fooled his old soulmate and the two geriatric gods who would soon be dethroned.